Peter Clark. I'm chairman of the Charter Review Committee, and I want to welcome you to our public forum. This is an event which we are using as a listening time and clarifying if we need to, but we will be having another event in the spring as we formulate specific recommendations where there will be kind of a targeted agenda of those. Tonight is much more open and informal, so I welcome you to this event. I want to put the program up. You have that on a piece of paper that you have in front of you, but I do want to emphasize that there are really basically three segments for tonight. They are the Purposes event handout section, about a 5 or 6 minute, maybe 7 minute introduction. If we have past committee and members and commission members, we hope to have introduced them and have comments from them as people who've been involved in this process in the past. And then the third section is for open audience comments and questions, and we certainly will have plenty of time for that. So that's the basic time breakdown for this evening. I want to just let you know who we are. I'm the chairman, and we have the committee here in front of you. Vice Chairman Judy Fenwick will raise her hand and smile at you, and Secretary David Garrison. Carter Hunt is here, Charlie McCaffrey here, Flannery Rogers here, and Dan Shearer. Those are the members. The Charter Review Committee is a group that is called together every 7 years. We're the fourth in the life of the current charter, which was passed in 1990 and took effect in 1991. So each of those committees has undertaken a task that I will be describing to you in just a second. We also have the benefit of Frank Duffy at Town Council as an ex officio member, and Michael Palmer, Town Clerk, who's been assisting us in many ways. So that's the membership of our group. What we do, well, first I suppose I should stop and say, what does the charter do? The charter itself is the document that defines the structure of Falmouth government, identifies the pieces of that, names them, defines structures between them to some degree, responsibilities and authority that those pieces of our town government have. Whether it should have lots of procedural information in it is a question. There's certainly a lot of bylaws that sit behind the charter and give more detail to the charter language. Our goal is to recommend amendments in that charter language, and it's based explicitly in the language of the charter on hearing from the public and hearing from town officials. We've started to do that, and as you'll see in a moment, we're coming to the end of most of that early collection of information. Our goal is to create amendments that clarify the meaning of the structure, the meaning of the language of the charter, and hopefully creates a more effective government operation. The scope I want to mention to you, because we are not, under law, allowed to talk about other forms of government. That is done by a commission, and I can describe that process if anybody's interested in it briefly, but it is a different and a more demanding process under the law in terms of looking at the basic format of structure of government. We can, however, go beyond just amendments to the language of the charter to making suggestions about bylaw language or policy language that supports the structure. Our main focus is making those recommendations on the amendments. Our timeline has moved along. As this indicates, from July until December, we've been talking with people and gathering ideas. I'll show you a list of that in just a minute. We are moving into a phase of focusing on drawing together the most important issues that apply to the charter and the support language to the charter. And our goal is to present to the Board of Selectmen in July, give them time to review so that we can have articles to go to town meeting in the fall. And then there's another significant period of time for the Attorney General to review those that are passed by town meeting and for them to be put on the ballot in 2020. So the ultimate changes don't take place until that vote in 2020. What's happened so far, you can see here that we've interviewed with groups of people, individuals listed at the top. We also have done document review. Carter, you want to talk a little bit about the kind of document review we've done?
What we've done in part of looking at what is happening in the other 32 towns in the Commonwealth that have the same form of government we have, which is a representative town meeting and a Board of Selectmen form of government. We looked at that to determine what some of their charters look like and how they are set up and established, and what that has done for us is given us some ideas about the organization of our charter and how we should look in the future and possibly take some of those ideas from other communities and possibly use them.
Thank you. And Flannery, we've completed a survey. Flannery will say a few words about that.
So we created a public survey to get some initial public feedback, which you may have seen. There were paper copies handed out at town meeting and available at the libraries around town. We also had one online through SurveyMonkey. It was linked from the town's website. And the format was basically the summary of the charter that you have in your hand with a needs improvement, works well, and some place for written comment. We got 50 responses, 50 paper responses, and 42 online responses from that survey, which is now closed.
Thank you. We are going to move to this and then go back. The handouts that you have are 2 pages. One has the program on the front and a brief summary of the 9 articles of the charter on 1 page. The charter itself is 22 pages, 23 pages. We have copies of the whole charter here, and happy to hand it out to people who are interested, who want to refer to it, and certainly you can take them home. So I think we have a few enough people that we can give them to anybody who might like to have a copy of the full charter. It is also available online at the town website, and it's linked if you go to our webpage, the Charter Review webpage. The other document that you have is a 2-sided page with 33 questions on it. And these are basically issues that have evolved as we've talked with people, as we've thought about the charter ourselves and read through it. As we've looked at past reports, you notice that we have spent some time with the 2012, is it? 2012 committee report. So we have raised some of these questions ourselves, or people who have talked with us have raised them. It does not signify that we're going to do all of these things or that we have an opinion on all of these things. It's just a collection of questions and issues that have arisen. And going forward from this point, our work is to take these and the survey and what comes out of this public forum and quickly begin to focus in on the areas that we think are most pertinent to the charter or the most significant bylaw elements behind the charter. It is, again, the charter amendments that are most important. So that takes care of looking at our handouts. We'll move on here in just a second. It does say on your program, it does say here, that I was prepared to exercise a kind of 4-minute limit on speaking time. That clearly is not going to be too necessary with the number of people we have. The other thing I want to comment on is that the charter is about structure, role, responsibility. It is not about individuals. And we hope that your comments will focus on the roles and responsibilities and structures and relationships as you may see them operating, but we're not here to evaluate individuals. So with that, let me see if do you have any questions of me in terms of the process or the agenda? If not, I want to turn it over to Judy Fenwick. Judy, let's go back to this slide.
One that's in my desk. I don't like to sit down, so I'm going to get up and walk a little bit. So I served on the Charter Review number 3, which was 2011 to 2013, with a few other people who are in this room right now. When I was compiling this, Peter said that we reviewed, one of the documents was the final report from Charter Review Committee number 3. Well, also, we were given the reports from every other one of the Charter Review Committees, plus the original final report of the original commission. And I have found them to have been, as they have evolved, the original Charter Commission final report was really juicy and meaty, because it had to be. It was proposing a different form of government along with all of the necessary trappings that would go with that change. The Charter Review Committee number 1 did some tweaking. Charter Review Committee number 2 did quite a bit more, with a heavy focus on, I think, the planning board in Charter Review Committee number 2. And then Charter Review Committee number 3, I think we did some heavy tweaking. And I'm looking at people from that committee who are squinting in the back there. So our pressure or our burden is, as Review Committee number 4, has the charter been tweaked out to infinity? And we're finding that it has not, that there are some really valid questions on areas that need some attention. So what I wanted to do was let you know that several of the oldies but goodies going back to the original Charter Commission are still alive and kicking. Jane Abbott said she would like to have been here tonight. She doesn't drive anymore at night. And she said, and I want to talk about this because I think the history of the people on these committees there's a wonderful thread that passes through from one committee to another. Same with Megan Jones. Pat Kerfoot isn't here this evening because she's been sick, but she's going to come speak in front of the committee. And Kerry Murphy told me he's pretty much retired from town government, so he wished us luck. Marilyn Zach's pretty much the same thing. But you know that they still care, and that to me is a really important thing about what makes up the people who have come in the past to those of us who are doing this right now. But one thing I noticed that there's a very important person who served on Charter Review Committee number 1 and number 2, and that's Michael Corrigan, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. And each Charter Review Committee has invited members from the previous committees to come talk to us. And so far, we have not, as number 4, we have not had previous members come and talk to us.
Except you.
Well, exactly. Well, you're stuck with me. But I know Pat Kerfoot is going to be coming to talk to our group. I think Michael Corrigan would have been here if he was still with us. There's benefit of hindsight and the luxury of looking towards the future when you've had enough experience with the past. Anyway, I wanted to highlight some of those people. And this evening I see in the audience Paul Dreyer and Ralph Herbst, who were both my compatriots on Charter Review Committee number 3. So we wanted to set aside a little bit of comment time for you folks, if you're willing to speak about anything, and then open it up to the wider audience. So with that, I'll leave it to Peter to moderate from here.
So we have mics that can be passed around. Dan has one. Peter Cook is carrying one. Probably one person can cover whomever. You need to get close to the mic so you can hear your voice ringing around the room. That means the TV can hear it also. So we're happy to have comments from the past committee members, or let's start with them, and then certainly everybody will have a chance to talk to us about ideas you have of the charter. Certainly you can ask us questions, although you need to realize we have not yet decided on our top priorities at all. That's what comes next. So let's go. Anybody want to speak to us? And if you give your name, that would be helpful.
If
I can remember that, I will. Thank you very much for your invitation tonight. My name's Ralph Herbst. Hard to believe that we did this 7 years ago, but we had a good time with it. It was very educational, and I'm sure you will reap the rewards of your work. I'm looking at your list.
That's the evolving question two-page list, right?
Yeah, your list of 33 items that you're considering. And I can recall when we started our charter review, we invited, as you are doing tonight, previous members from the Charter Review Committee that had done it 7 years before we did. And I remember one very important thing, and that was that the chairman of that Charter Review Committee recommended that we focus and narrow down what we attempted to do to 5 or 6 items. And the reason for that was that when you go before town meeting or the town board of directors, if you want to explain to them 33 different things, you will lose their attention very rapidly. So that's what we did, and we picked 5 or 6 things that we thought were really important, and then we listed the other things we felt were important and handed them off as suggestions to the town manager and to the selectmen. I filled out your questionnaire that I received at town meeting, and I would like to add number 34 to your list because I don't see mine. And it would be, should selectmen be allowed to act as town meeting members? And years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, those of you who are town meeting members may have remembered that young Mr. Putnam stood up before he moved out of town and had this as a petition article, and it was turned down. And I thought it was a good time to re-examine that. If you believe in the separation of powers, which is the separating of legislative and executive, you look at your handout that lists the articles in the charter. You'll see Article 2 says all legislative powers are from town meeting, and it also says the Board of Selectmen serves as the chief executive organization. So it's my belief that selectmen should not be members of town meeting, and it's not a big deal because not all of them are, and there's only 5 selectmen, and so you're talking about a minimum number of votes. But it's the thing that our government, our Constitution is based on, about separation of powers. So I wish you would consider that as part of your charter review and including it in the charter. I'd just give you one example. If the citizens should submit a petition article, the Board of Selectmen vote to support or not to support the article, and then it's submitted to town meeting. So then they vote again on the same thing. So it seems to me like that would be a conflict of interest. Under Article number 7, I would hope that you would include under appointed boards the Community Preservation Committee. The Board of Selectmen appoint 4 members to the Community Preservation Committee. That committee is extremely important to this town and deals with enormous amounts of money. And they have huge discretion as to how they recommend that to town meeting. So I would hope that you would add them to your appointed boards group. And then also, there is an affordable housing committee in this town. And affordable housing is a huge issue here on Cape Cod and also in Falmouth. So I would suggest that you invite someone from the Affordable Housing Committee to speak to you, to see whether or not you want to include them in the charter under appointed town boards. So I wish you all the best of luck and in your deliberations. It's important, and don't try and bite off too big a chunk. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ralph. I had said to the committee that I certainly hope they would ask any clarifying questions. It's not a night when we want to propose alternatives or pass judgment in any way, but were there any clarifying questions at all for Ralph? Thank you. Next person.
My name is Paul Dreyer. I was on the previous Charter Review Committee, and I echo what Mr. Herbst said about making it clear of what's going on. We had 15 articles that we recommended to town meeting, all of which have passed, but we had a number of other issues that we raised that were not to the level of a charter review, and that included administrative and operational issues, some of which have been done, some have not. And I suggest you look at the report as to some suggestions that were made at that time, because I think some of them were pretty well done. One, for example, was improving the town website, and the town has already done that. So there are some good ideas that you may want to consider as well. But I think getting through the town meeting in an easy fashion is very important. We found that out with the planning board. We have some complicated issues. The last town meeting did not go very well. And I think they're very complicated. So if you can simplify it, it'd make it a lot easier for everyone. Thank you.
Paul, while you have the microphone, I guess I would ask you a question. When you made those other recommendations and left them on a desk, will you recommend to us that that's what we do with them too, is state them, or are there other things you wished your committee had done to move those forward?
Well, I think the number we had was a reasonable number to get through town meeting.
Right.
The other ones were things we discussed and thought it was worthy of at least raising the issue for the Board of Selectmen to consider. Your approach might be very different because your committee is very different. In the past, there have been a lot of repeat people, and except for Ms. Fenwick, there have been a lot of repeat people on the charter that carry a trail through there. In this case, many of these people are new. So I think it depends on how you approach the charter review and what your committee feels comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter,
Judy?
could I just respond?
Yes.
So, Paul, you had sent us an email suggesting that we look at what we called above and beyonds from the Charter Review number 3, and we did discuss them as a committee and made some updates, notes on things that had been accomplished. But one of the crying needs that we saw was about the way committees, the process and responsibilities of committees in the committee handbook, which was a suggestion that was made. And a draft and then a final was put through by the selectmen that is now in the process of being revised even more fully. But that was an impetus. And also of note is that Brad Stumke, who was chair of number 3, after a year had gone by and we hadn't heard anything back from the selectmen, he sent a letter reminding them of these things, and it sparked more of a fire to keep them alive. So, but I appreciate the suggestions.
Mr. Zavala, come in behind you.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening. Jay Zavala. I was in Group 2 of the Charter Review. I selected 3 of the questions of the 32 that were listed that I thought this group could drill into. Question 3, does the town meeting need better procedures to ensure timely and understandable article language? my stance is a resounding yes, very much so. Not only for the benefit of the body to be able to both understand and deliberate, but for it to be enacted and understood how to implement. So for every layer and level, I think it's very important, and I'd like to see the committee take that one forward. I also feel that number 4, does the civility of town meeting debate need attention? Well, we invite celestial attention at the very beginning when we ask that our Lord guide us in some direction. But there's no accountability for the town meeting members themselves. And I think some level of accountability has to be directed to us. We are responsible for our own actions in town meeting, and there should be ramifications if our conduct is not becoming. And the third item is number 10. Should the charter define broadly? And that's where I stopped, on the word broadly. Because I believe when laws are legislated and then regulators grab a hold of them and then implementers have their turn, everyone adds a layer to this process. And it's my belief that the charter review should take a broad perspective on all of its deliberations rather than getting into the short grass and trying to make it all happen in that one document. So those are my 3 observations. There'll be some others that I'll address in writing, but for the sake of this meeting, and thank you again for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Let me just comment quickly on this. Mr. Zavala referred to a version of it that had 32, and there were versions at 20 and 25 and 28 and 32. It's 33 now, and we may in fact have a 34th or a 35th or a 36th. It is on the website, and it grows, and you can go look back to it and see whether an issue appears on it. And we'll probably keep it there. But as we go forward, of course, we're going to have to be starting to do what some of you are doing, which is what are my top 5 or what are my top 10 or whatever the number is, and how are we going to group them. And we'll try to keep that also moving forward on the website to let you know what our thinking is. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte Harris, on North Falmouth and on the Planning Board. I want to thank you very much for sending the questionnaire to the Planning Board members to prompt us into paying attention and giving you some input. I really welcome that. Thank you. And I've actually come down tonight to say something further about planning than I thought to include in my response to you. Any good plan it's incomplete without an accountability provision. And where the charter is not a plan, it lays out a blueprint for how to govern ourselves. It's lacking in a way to hold any of the elected or appointed boards accountable for their planning function and carrying it out. It says these plans are to exist, but it doesn't say in any way that they're to matter. And if they don't, that's a problem. So I know it's been a matter of discussion among you. I hope you find a good resolution to it, that the 3 plans that are named in the charter would be linked in some way, and that there would be an accountability provision. Some entity, probably the Board of Selectmen, but an entity would be responsible for seeing what happened with your plan. Did you do it? In the section where where the different boards and committees are enumerated, it's not a full listing, but the ones that are there, the general provisions provide that they are to report annually, either in person or in writing, to the Board of Selectmen. And it might be possible, I don't know how the language would go, to include some reference in their report in terms of the plans. Did you do what you were supposed to do? Or did you think of something different to do? What relationship did the work have to the plans that were laid out for the town? So a general thing about accountability. The other point that I hope to be able to make tonight is really a very picky ex-English teacher point. There's the listing of the committees, and there's an A-B structure, many A's, not so many B's. If you're going to give the responsibilities, that would be good. It would be, I know when first I took up an interest in the Planning Board, I looked at the charter to see what we were supposed to do, what our authority would be, and it's pretty complete what it says about the Planning Board. as much as you would want without losing all flexibility. The others are very sketchy, but some they don't say at all what their responsibility might be. So either no bees or all bees or maybe. The third thing really is operational. Thank you for that word, more than something to include in the charter. Technology really would make it possible. This charter exists within a whole nexus of laws. It has to exist, the state says so, and we have it, and it goes on in the bylaws and all the rules of the town. I mean, it's just a network there. If there were links to those parts so that people who are trying to understand how the town works would be able to see from the electronic linkage to go to the next step. For instance, on the Zoning Board of Appeals, it doesn't say anything about what their relationship is either to the planning board or to anything else or what they're responsible for. And if you didn't know where to look, you would never really know. It could link to their page. It could link to the state law that enables it. And, you know, there are a lot of possibilities there, but some way to make it clearer in the way the charter is presented on the town website, that it is embedded in a whole host of laws and bylaws.
Thank you. Any clarification questions here? Judy?
So
Before the microphone goes too far, Peter.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So
sorry.
Charlotte, you were saying, I'm not sure what the language might look like, but maybe. So I think one of the things that would be most helpful to this committee is if you have suggested language in mind, to submit it to us. It saves us from trying to cook it up.
So I'm to think further. Okay.
Or just an example. You don't have to do it for the whole charter, but just
No, I
a
mean,
model.
when you were talking
Yeah.
about the planning integration.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be great. And could I unveil a little bit this committee task force that I'm on with the assistant town manager and Doug Brown? We're trying to pull together a committee handbook that's not just about how a meeting is run, but that talks about each of the committees that we have in this town, that elaborates on what is not here in the charter, including sourcing what the source of their mandate is from, whether it's Mass General laws, bylaws, you know, was it created for hurricane preparedness? So that's a real work in progress, but it will take care of the things that you feel like are missing in the charter.
Carter, before you give it.
This would be a question to the former folks on committees. You bring up a point that's really one of the ones that we're going to be debating at some point in time, and that is, do we take the time to define each committee, its roles and responsibilities, how many members, et cetera? Some town charters, as I indicated earlier, do that. Now, the question is that necessary in our charter, or do we leave the appointed boards, which are done by the Board of Selectmen, do we leave that appointment to them and allow them to establish that rules and requirements? And maybe, as Judy has indicated, that gets put into a committee handbook, or it gets put into the bylaws rather than being in the charter. So that if you have a committee that's not going to be here in 5 years, do we really need that? So that's sort of, you know, one of those dilemmas we're working on. How much do you put in it, and how much do you need? And is that really the right thing? And I certainly would like to hear your opinions on whether that is, which side of that, it's not really a fence, it's sort of a rounded system, where you'd like to see that.
Anybody can respond. Charlotte, you can, or other people can respond to that.
I guess we all have opinions on it. I think there would be at least two kinds of committees. Those that have been around for a long time and they're clearly stable, they're going to continue. And for those, probably at least a very brief summary of their responsibilities would be very, very useful. And then for the committees that they're somewhere between ad hoc and stable, perhaps not, and some explanation of the two groups. That's what comes to mind, but I don't know the right answer. I think the added information, the addendum in a way, to all of it might solve the problem.
One of the things that is capable with technology, wasn't 15 years ago, is you can at least indicate where that information is with a link, so that someone doesn't have to flounder around to find it. So I think that's part of what you started with, that we could make that more. Yeah. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I'd just make a
I'm sorry.
comment. I'm sorry.
All right.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment. There are only about 4 or 5 committees that are elected in town. And there's a distinction between all these numerous committees. There's about 50 of them. And the Board of Selectmen appoint almost 200 people in the course of a year or so to these various committees. So there's a big distinction on what the committees can do and cannot do. The other point I'd like to make is some of these policies that we're talking about really, in my opinion, do not belong in the charter. There's something can be worked out later on.
Thank you, Deb.
Deborah Siegel, Precinct 6. I'm a town meeting member. The first number I'm going to address here is the easiest one, which is number 2, about gender. And I would agree that changing to select board, which has been done in many other towns across the state, and from what I understand has worked well, would be a good solution. And rather than trying to change select men or select woman, could either just use select men or select woman, or refer to the person's name as a member of the select board. Moving on to number 3, I concur with Jay Zavala that town meeting does need much better procedures to ensure timely and understandable article language. Number 5, the process for closing debate at town meeting does not satisfactorily acknowledge appropriate weight of comment on both sides of the question, and I think that anybody here who is a town meeting member would agree with that and has seen the problems that have arisen. And I think that goes directly to the job of the moderator. The moderator has to handle that in a more fair way, and I don't think that's happening right now. And there have been any number of times in the last few years when people have approached the moderator and said, we have a problem, because there were people lined up to speak and they were not allowed to speak. And particularly if it happens late at night when town meeting wants to go home and town meeting is asked whether or not to close debate, and they say yes without without any attention being paid to whether that's the appropriate thing to do. So I would encourage something to happen, a change there. There is one other item that I don't see on this list unless I've missed it, but Peter, you have said that there are a number of other items. There was a suggestion that we have 9 Board of Selectmen, 1 representing each precinct. Did that not make it onto the final list here?
Yeah, let me explain, Debbie, that Town Council looked at the language of commissions' responsibilities and committees' responsibilities, and the advice was that that actually changes the structure because it changes the method of election. It is important to recognize that a commission doesn't have to be called to make earth-shattering changes in the structure. A commission could be called to make small changes in the structure, but it does appear that that is a commission responsibility, not a committee responsibility, which is why it's not on the list. What is on the list at number 1 is, should we be espousing that? From what we know, the town would like to see a commission formed. It's not our business to get into that topic. I'd be interested to know, by a show of hands, how many people here think that a commission would be important to change some minor or major piece of the structure? I see 1 hand. 2? 3? No, 2. A comment. Oh, yeah. We'll welcome comments. Sir, Deb, go ahead. That's why it isn't there.
Okay, since it's not there, then I won't comment on it.
Yes.
Hi, Mary Harris, Precinct 5, and I'm on the Finance Committee, but I'm not here representing the Finance Committee. Back to the topic of committees, I think it's very unclear that the Finance Committee is in fact elected by town meeting. And it needs some specific language in there to clear up when and how people get on the Finance Committee, who they report to, what they're responsible for, because there is a good deal of confusion over that. So I would like you to remember that that's a fairly unique committee when you're filling out things. And is now the time to ask my other questions, or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to see some place where town meeting members are required to keep their contact information up to date on the town website. There's no requirement for that. And in my own precinct, I attempted to get in touch with the 27, well, the other 26 members, and at least 5 of them were unreachable either by phone or email. So I think it should be an absolute requirement that you could be able to find your own town meeting members. And it might be helpful on precinct meetings if attendance were taken at precinct meetings too. And then I also had one really dumb question, which is, why is it Chapter C? What's Chapter A and B?
Yeah, were you reading Chapter C?
It says Chapter C, Falmouth Home Rule Charter, and it says it on the website too, and I kept looking around for what's Chapter A and B, and I can't, why
Oh,
is
well,
it
the
Chapter
C, the C stands for charter. So the C is Charter Section 1 or Section 3. That's why there's no A and B.
Is it, well, if there's no A and B, and you say it's a Chapter 3, it should be clear on the website, because I spent a lot of time looking for around what's the rest of it.
Let me just say that something that is not reflected in those evolving questions is a meeting we had just 2 nights ago with the chair of the Finance Committee and members of the Finance Committee, and they raised some of the things that you did, and so I'm sorry they're not yet on that list, but we have heard about that. Yes?
My name is Mark Cool, and I just want to, number one, my comment is going to be Merry Christmas to you all, and Happy New Year, and thank you for your service. This is an admirable duty you perform for our community, and probably equal with the planning board, as far as I'm concerned. So, moving on, number 1 of the handout, so I was one of the individuals that raised my hand with regard to structure. So just for clarification, the board is an advisory board with a recommendation for the potential for getting a committee together for whether it be minor or major structure issues with
Our committee?
Right.
In terms of a commission, all our committee could do is report to the Board of Selectmen and town meeting that we saw substantial interest in a commission.
Okay.
But then it becomes a totally different process of requiring 15% of the registered voters to sign that it's important, and people have to be ready to run on a ballot for that commission. So it's a pretty complex process that is spelled out. I can give you a copy of it if you'd like to see it.
That's actually, I would appreciate that just for
Yep.
my purview. But I would suggest to the board here that given the tone of our culture of late, and especially specific to Falmouth, with a design to encourage civic engagement, the consideration that I would urge the board to look at would be instead of a representative town meeting, an open town meeting. Now, I don't know, because I really haven't researched it that much, the pros and cons. But if it gives one iota of an opportunity above and beyond the community engagement, the civic engagement that's represented here tonight, I think you had said 50 people responded on paper and 48 on the electronic. I think there's a need. And so if a need can be open and campaigned for, and people take pride in their community having that ability to voice their opinion instead of, and I think it was discussed, and my wife is a town meeting member, it's difficult to contact town meeting members to give your voice to that particular person. So, to keep it short, I would ask the board to give great consideration to an open town meeting rather than a representative.
That is one of those structural changes that, in fact, a commission would have to make. We hear, in the realm that we can touch, a lot of comment about recruiting more public involvement and clarity of language of articles and educating town meeting members about them. Those elements of what you're talking about all fall within our purview, but the actual restructuring of town meeting does not. Mr. Zavala wanted to speak again. Is that right? No, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Joanne Treisman, Precinct 2. I just want to thank Mark for channeling all my thoughts as I sit here. I come out of open town meeting tradition for 50 years. I'm here because I'm interested to know what goes on in my government, and I have nowhere to find out. I've gone to precinct meetings. I've run for this representative thing. It's only 43 towns in our Commonwealth that have representative town meeting. So those of us who come out of open town meeting feel invested in our town. And I see that 90 people were invested enough. I think I was one of the online answerers to the survey. So those of us who know how it works understand that you're going to get everybody, or at least a few more people than 243, to be involved in the town government. So thank you, Mark, for that comment, and I look forward to hearing more.
Deb, you're closest, so why don't you take it, and then Mary.
Deborah Siegel again. I understand that this group cannot deal with that, but I'd like to make a couple of comments. I completely agree with Mark about getting people more involved. If our citizens are having a problem getting in touch with their town meeting members, that's what we have to deal with, and I think Mary's suggestion that town meeting members must be accessible is an important one. However, I would like to say, as a town meeting member of long standing, we have many town meeting members who do not prepare for town meeting. They're elected, they come to town meeting unprepared, and the thought of having everybody in town be able to come to a town meeting and express their feelings when they haven't educated themselves, gives me the heebie-jeebies, to be honest with you. So I understand why you have both made that suggestion, but I think in a town this size that it can be a real problem. And I think we can address the problem of people being involved in other ways than going to an open town meeting. But again, that's not your purview. So.
And I don't want to draw a line on that debate, but anybody who wants to talk to us about how to make the current government engage more with citizens or those kinds of things, that's what we can act on. Ms. Harris.
I was one of the 50 who filled out a paper survey. I wouldn't want that to be construed that I'm in favor of changing the form of government, because I'm not.
I'd like to comment not on the change to an open town meeting. I've been part of town where we've had both. I prefer the representative, at least they turn up. When in an open town meeting, what you get are all the angry people when there's something to be angry about. Otherwise, they're not there. And I think one of the ways you can know that the charter that we have is working well is the low attendance here tonight. If there were a very big issue, or even a medium-sized issue, you'd have a big crowd or a medium-sized crowd. You've got a little crowd.
Again, I don't want further comment necessarily about open and representative. If you want the representative to work better, tell us your ideas about that. And if you want a commission, tell us that. And that's about what we can do with it. Mr. Cool.
One of the things that I neglected to say in my first opening was I would support Ralph's number 34 wholeheartedly.
And Dan, you want?
I'm not speaking right now as a member of this committee, but I'm speaking as a town meeting member of over 26 years. And I'd like to know how you would like to be informed. On the internet, a letter? I mean, I'll go all the way to write it, because I feel very, very badly. At this past town meeting, I think I got 6 phone calls, which is more than I normally get. And I do try and prepare, and I do enjoy town meeting. And I feel that a lot of us aren't prepared. And so they don't speak, or they don't work with it. So, give us some ideas how you would like to be notified, or how your friends would like to be notified. I think that might help. Thank you.
Well, we certainly don't need to ask everybody to speak a third or fourth time just to fill up our time. But we want to hear ideas that you have. Do any committee members here have anything that they want to ask or put before the crowd?
I know one question I had in specifically inviting, I'm not sure.
Yeah, just get closer. You're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is of previous committee members, if you remember some particular challenge from your time on a charter review committee, some challenge that was not met.
Thank you, Peter.
To answer your question specifically, the second group placed 13 articles on the warrant. 3 were defeated by a 2/3 majority. Those 3 dealt with your question number 18, should residency requirements be reviewed? That was a crushing defeat for that concept, and perhaps it's time to revisit that. That was the only of the 13. All the others passed, the other 10 passed unanimously, but that was an area of great concern. And while I have the microphone, I take ownership of it. There was a question on 21, should the roles of assistant town manager and finance director, among others, be defined in the charter? And I would urge the committee to consider doing so.
Were there any other challenges from former charter review folks? Not met?
Judy, would you say again what you're asking for here?
Yeah, sort of unmet needs. Were there things that you, as a committee, wanted to see happen that you did not get through?
So you're asking us to remember back 7 years. And since you were on that committee, Judy, I'm going to say no, I don't have any.
Well, I think we're winding up unless committee members have anything they want to say or, yes, one more comment. Use the microphone if you will, because.
I was not clear on the purpose of the meeting. Were you looking for us to comment on how we felt about every one of your questions, or just
No, we were not. It's there if you have feelings about them, to let us hear them, but you certainly were not asked to respond to each of them. And if you leave with that list in hand and something comes to mind, we're always happy to get an email or get further comment from you. So, Ralph, if you remember something that was a disappointment, you let us know.
And one last thing for a final note from me anyway. I would urge every member, not because you're a member of the board, but because you're a member of the community, that you recommend and urge friends to pay attention to what's going on, because what's going on is dictating the future of Falmouth. And so I would strongly urge friends, family, reach out and just start the dialogue, start the conversation, engage. So.
Thank you. Mr. Dryer, one last comment?
Yeah, one final comment on your question here about the planning board at the local comprehensive plan's priority. The planning board spent 2 years developing the local comprehensive plan, and that includes public hearings, and each and every one of them went before town meeting was approved. So there is a group of local comprehensive plan. There's a long-term plan, but to the planning board, and I'm a member of the planning board as well, it was very important to spend that amount of time on it. So look at the local comprehensive plan. I think it's important. It is a long-term plan, and it is consistent with what the Board of Selectmen are talking about in the strategic plan. But we think it is important, so I would not minimize that.
So from your perspective, you see a correlation or a coordination between the local comprehensive plan and the strategic plan, or?
Well, not directly, but there are some elements that do mesh. They're very short term, 5 years, but we're looking 40 to 50 years down the road.
Right.
But the local comprehensive plan was vetted and spent a lot of time working on it, and it is important from our perspective. And the planning board looks at it long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call, going. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you.